During this time of uncertainty and difficulties, do we really need to be here to address the challenges of leadership? The answer is yes. We need leaders even more now to lead the way in the new normal. Because leaders are a special breed who rise to the occasion to thrive in the between. The between is an uncharted and unknown space, braved only by the enterprising. It is the hinges of leadership that require much wisdom, skill, and grace to navigate. It is a place of great potential, where the sky is not the limit, but only the beginning. It is the spaces in between where we learn to reframe, recover, and reinvent to rise in this life that we live. So, be prepared and learn from the best to navigate the hinges of leadership to thrive in the between. Welcome to Eagles Leadership Convention 2021.
Good afternoon and welcome to ELC 2021 Roundtable on the Lost Art of Fathering in the New Normal. My name is thru and I'm very glad to be your moderator for today. We are very privileged to be joined by three special guests this afternoon. They are Jason Wong, former chairman Focus on the Family, founder Dads for Life; Brian Tan, CEO, Center for Fathering and Dads for Life; and all the way from Malaysia, Joshua Hong, co-founder and chairman of Better Dads Malaysia. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for having us. We also want to say a big hello to all our participants who are joining us on Zoom. Give us a big wave from wherever you are, if you can see and hear us clearly. Before we start today's session proper, we want to have a simple icebreaker activity to see which countries we are from. Okay, we're seeing some numbers coming in. I see that we have quite a number from Singapore, obviously where Eagles is located. We also have a big number from Malaysia and Indonesia, and even all the way from Australia. Indeed, fathering has become increasingly challenging in this new normal. Today, our three panelists will share their personal experiences, stories, as well as touch on the trends and issues facing fathers all around the region today. We will also hear from them on how fathers can navigate through the challenges of the day and regain the lost art of fathering. Let's start by getting each of our three speakers to share some opening remarks. Jason?
Hi, my name is Jason Wong. I have two children. My older girl is 26 years old. My boy is 21 years old. So I've been married for about 30 years. I think my interest in the fathering goes back to many years ago when I was a prison officer. I worked with the prisoners for 17 years, and after that I worked with at-risk children, at-risk youths, abused children, and that was when I discovered how fatherlessness can impact the next generation. And that's why I'm very passionate about fathering. Yeah, and I see fathering as a very important topic.
Thanks, Jason. Brian?
Well, thanks, Alvin. I'm Brian. I'm a father of four kids, very young kids, ranging from between 5 months old to 11 years old. Why fathering is important to me today is, I nearly forgot what it means to be a father. I didn't know what being a father meant because I didn't really have my dad present in my life early. I was just fortunate that at a very critical point in my life, I was able to come in contact with some great guys from Dads for Life who decided to invest in my life to help me understand what it takes to be a man, a husband, and a father. And today, I would like to credit my thriving marriage, my good relationships with my children, really to the fathering movement in Singapore, and also with the partnership of the other organizations like Better Dads Malaysia and all around, because it really takes a community for us to thrive as dads, not just at home in the community, but also as a nation. And we know that great dads build great families, great dads also build great citizens for our nations. Great dads build good leaders for the family, for the community, and our nation. So what hinders a dad from being the best that we can be? I guess that's really the topic of today's close session amongst men, where we talk about the challenges that hinder us from being the best that we can be for our wives, for our children. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Yeah, this is Joshua from Better Dads Malaysia. I've been working with young people for the past 20 years, and this is actually for the past decade. I find, young people has become less resilient. Then a lot of all these juvenile cases, young people in depression, and that was around 7-8 years ago. I came across Dads for Life and Center for Fathering in Singapore, and that's where it really impacted me. I realized that a lot of all these young people, the problem of young people, social ill, has to do with fatherlessness. So yeah, I've been passionate about working with young people and also nation building. So I thought that if we were to help young people more effectively, I have to deal with the root cause, which is father. So 2 years ago, I resigned from the previous job and I founded Better Dads Malaysia. Yeah, thank you.
To actually find out and ask them some common questions on fathering, let's hear what they have.
I think it's because fathers are important. Sadly, a lot of fathers don't know that they're important. I always believe that the best gift we can give to a child is a father, a mother, both involved, and then for the father and the mother to have a stable marriage relationship. Just simply three things. A child needs a father, a child needs a mother who's there, and a child needs the father and the mother to love each other. But the sad thing is that when fathers are not aware and they do not play their role, so you can see even if my hand movement is like, the child, instead of getting two, the child is getting one less. And the worst is that when fathers are not there, they're absent, or worse, they're abusive, and then the child will miss out on a lot of things. And of course, if the father doesn't know the importance of his role and the marriage, then the child will be growing up in a very unstable environment. So instead of love, there will be a lot of anger, a lot of harsh parenting. Now, so if we can help fathers to be more involved, to recognize their role as a father and of course as a husband, then the child will benefit. And then in terms of benefits, we're talking about psychological, emotional, social, in school they can do better, the reduction in at-risk behaviors, which earlier Joshua alluded to it, right, the youth at risk, So if fathers are involved, that would mean less work for the police, less need for prisons, less need for children's homes. So that's why fathering is such an important topic to talk about.
Yeah, I think most of all, I think, especially in the Asian context, fathers is seen to be distant. And for those of you who understand Chinese, they won't even shed a tear. Even they can shed a blood, but not a tear. And I think a lot of times, and men don't really express themselves. I think probably it's culturally, or even it is the perception. And for fathers, and a lot of times, I think previously people understand that the role of a father is actually to be the breadwinner. In fact, in 2009, Singapore actually conducted a survey on the roles of a father. In fact, I think half of the percentage of the community, in fact, thought that the role of a father is actually the breadwinner. Merely that. Then the other one is actually the emotional support for children. Only 36% of them think that is the role of a father. However, handling kids on a daily basis, only 3% thought that is a job of a father. Okay, I'm not saying that this is right. It's just that perception from the community. And protect, nurture children and know their friends, it's only 1% of that. However, for the past 5 decades, all these developed nations, including United States, Canada, UK, or even Australia, they found out that in fact, all these developed nations, they also realized that there is a spike of juvenile cases. Young people became less resilient when they research and do a lot of case study. They realized, in fact, all these root cause, the American political scientists found out that it has been linked to fatherlessness. So pre-pandemic, father's role is already that important. So I think we are in the pandemic. There's already research and a survey showing that, when people are stuck at home, the emotional needs, and also even recently in Malaysia, we also have research on the depression rate among the young children has been rising. And that's why I personally think that even pre-pandemic, fathers really make a difference in terms of young people's mental well-being. I think it's even more critical now.
I was just going to jump on the bandwagon and say that the fact that many of us are tuning in today in this current stream right now kind of highlights why fathering is such an important topic, especially to us men. I mean, look at the sources of masculinity. Where do we find sources of masculinity? Most of us receive it from our own dad. Some of us receive it from other male authority figures or men that we look up to in our lives. How do we see society functioning? You find that the man's presence, the man's voice has a lot to do with shaping the kind of society that we live in, the kind of community that we live in. When we see women and children being abused, the man's voice has to come up to speak into these spaces. We look at issues like abortions. Where is the man's voice when the women needs? Because we all know that our children need to have, as Jason has said, both a mother and a father, and in the absence of that, at least a mother figure or a father figure or a male authority figure. And that's how I understand my role as a son, as a man, as a husband, and as a father. And that's what I hope to be able to pass on to my children and my children's children, the blueprints of what it means to undertake these roles. And for my daughter, I think it's important for her to know how she should be treated, how she can expect to be treated as a woman, as a wife, and also as a mother in time to come.
Yeah, in fact, this is a very timely question whereby this is critical in Malaysia. Since June or early July, in fact, our MOH and also the loyal police released a statement whereby Malaysian suicidal rate has reached to all-time high for the past 21 years. And they realized that recently there is a lot of middle-aged men committing suicide. I think we need to be consistent even we are in distress, or even I think we need to be a role model.
Just probably two things to add. I guess during the times of pandemic where there's job stress, job loss, I will always encourage fathers in times of crisis is first to take care of yourself. Sometimes we want to be hero and to save everybody, right? But we forget that we also need self-care, and it's like when you go onto a plane, the first thing the air steward will say as a safety message is that if there's a crisis, belt yourself out before you belt someone else. Yeah. So I will always tell that to parents, especially fathers who take on the whole responsibility of being the provider, the protector, etc. I think the other thing I would encourage fathers to do is don't struggle on your own. Look for help, especially join the fathering community. There are others who will be able to come alongside, and then if need be, seek professional help. Yeah. So I don't think we should suffer on our own.
Some things I will add on, especially what we've realized had been useful for some of our constituents in Singapore, for the Centre for Fathering, was really to galvanize the rest of the community, the other dads, to really for those who are able to manage the home front, to really lean forward to help another dad in their community or within their own sphere of influence, to support them in these trying times. For those who are employers, I think there's a lot that we could do to support one another. For those who are consumers of F&B and services, we try to encourage them to go out and do this and lend that support. For the dad who have encountered a bad circumstance because of this pandemic, yes, we try to get them to do self-care, we try to get them to seek help if need be, but more importantly, what we try to encourage them to do is also to seize some of these teachable moments to share their burdens, their anxieties with their children, their family. I mean, that was something that I personally did also alongside many other men, was to just share my frustration, my anxiety, my fears, and when I act in a manner that's unbecoming of a dad or even an employer or even a husband, and my children get to see it because they see me in the context of working at home. I have to take the initiative to not just repent, but to seek reconciliation and to restore the relationship and to address the hurt that I have caused the family. So through that, they see that life isn't all rosy. We rise and we fall. In fact, for me, I fall so many times, but it's all about picking myself up and making right what I've done wrong. And I think that holds true for many other men that we've seen within our sphere of influence.
For myself, what I do is make sure I will have those quiet time, me time, because I think that's sometimes very neglected. It could be just going for a walk, going for a run, listening to music. Of course, have to let my wife know, and you just take over for half an hour. I just need to have some me time. And I guess if we have a clear line of communication, I think our spouse will understand and go ahead, and then you come back refreshed, you come back, able to be the hero again, that everybody expects. So I would say those me time is very important.
Wow. Through this pandemic, I have learned to be kind to myself. I've learned to be gentler on myself, especially in the areas where I failed as a dad, I failed as a husband, I failed as an employer, I failed as a friend, even as a son to my own parents. There were many times I was just paralyzed trying to manage everything else. And because I have such high expectations of myself to be a provider, to be a protector, and to do what is right, and when I find myself falling short, I tend to be hard on myself. So one thing I've learned is really just to be kind to myself, to try to laugh it off. It helps for me to also share it with, like I said earlier, share it with my family, so they understand what goes on in my head. I try not to bottle things up before, because it just isn't healthy for them. And they know that something's wrong with daddy. The other thing is really humility to seek help. Sometimes we all just need to reach out to someone just to have that open, vulnerable conversation. And I'm just glad that I have enough good friends and male mentors around to just reach out to in times when I just find that I can't manage it myself. There's no shame in that, and I've learned to deal with that.
I hope we all manage to find our me time as fathers. Let's take a look at what some of you have put in. The big word that sticks out is, I don't have to read it, it's time, right? And next to that, we have distractions. I see social media influence, again, lack of time, busyness. All right, thanks for keying your 3 words. Again, time, distractions, social media influence, busyness. Why don't we hear from Jason, what 3 words he came up with?
Well, my 3 words were first, trends. I think trends meaning the economic trends. Where is the economy going? So it concerns jobs, stress, so it's all related, the trends. The other aspect of trends is where is the moral ecology heading, the social environment. I think fathers are very concerned. I saw the word culture, I saw the word social media. So that is the kind of trends, right, as a father. The other 2 words, I would say time and tools. So trends, time, tools. I think time is already, many people have come up with the word time. Time is so short nowadays, and even now, even though my children have grown up, as I look back, I wish I had spent more time with them. So The third one is tools, because tools to be a better father. And sometimes, especially for us, if we don't have enough time, more so we need the tools so that whatever time we have with our children, if we have the right tools, then we will be able to do the fathering well. I have known of fathers who manage to squeeze out time, but they use the time wrongly, watch TV or scold the kids, or being a bad role model. So time without tools will not be helpful as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Jason. Certainly fathering is tough, but it's not an impossible task. Let's hear what our three panelists have to say about being intentional dads in a pre-recorded video segment.
I think it's really, first and foremost, it's really about being aware of our influence amongst over everyone at home, and also being clear of our role. One of the things that many of us found, or many of us dads struggle with initially, is that whole the role clarification when it comes to shared parenting. Because we're at home, we start working through things together. When our kids had to go through home-based learning, it was a whole other challenge for, especially us in Singapore, because there's so much expectations of our kids to engage in school, and at the same time, my wife and I, we make sure that we distribute the time when everyone needs to work. We increase breathing spaces for play, for time together, just to have a breather before we embark on the next part of the day. And another thing that we had to be really mindful about is the way we carry ourselves at work, right? Because now that we're working from home, our kids get to see us. So there's the opportunity for us, for me to really integrate work and life. Because who I am at work, my kids get to see and compare with who I am at home and who I am in the community when I volunteer my time with. So they get to see Brian in all these three spaces, and suddenly I felt that stress to make sure that it is consistent, it is coherent for them. So I can't be a hero out there and a zero at home. I kind of need to be as involved with them as I am with my work. I kind of need to thrive in my leadership role at work as I do at home. And in places where I fall short of, they need to see me taking the step to make right what is wrong and to restore the relationship.
I think as a man or a working father, we have time schedule for our work. There is target to meet, stuff like that, and we never ever, most of the time, we never ever allocate time for our children or even to our spouse. I think what can we do in terms of, especially in the pandemic, whereby your kids are having home-based learning and you attending meetings, stuff like that. In fact, all our schedule is actually messed up. But I think what as a father we can do is really plan our time. We really need to intentionally schedule a time for bonding. Okay, this is what we can do. And I think since we are having a lot of screen time, when we are bonding with our child or with our children, I think let's try something without the screen. When we talk about self-care, do exercise together with the children. And recently, although the kids are having a lot of screen time on education, they still need their screen time for games and stuff like that. I think what my wife did is actually brilliant. She actually scheduled a time when they need to earn their screen time for games, or even they are watching their YouTubes, their favorite movies on Netflix. They really need to earn that. So we actually split out the house chore, to earn the point and the time. I think which is brilliant. The other day I was teaching my youngest girl to wash the dishes, and it was a mess in the kitchen. But then I really appreciate the time. Okay, yes, I need to redo that again, but I think it will be a moment that she would remember. So I think we need to intentionally make that happen.
I guess life is never fair. There will be times where we don't have a perfect family. But I guess that's where we need to make the best out of it. Fathers may be absent for so many reasons: sickness, disease, drugs, imprisonment, death, divorce. Similarly, mothers can also be absent for the same reasons. But in this case, if it is a family where the dad is not around, and only the mom, then what can the mom do? Well, I always encourage moms who struggle on their own. Sometimes actually the dad is alive, just that the dad is absent. I would say that no matter what the mothers do, a single mom were to do, the mom can take on additional responsibilities, but the mom can never be a dad. Similarly, the dad can never be a mom. They can only take on more responsibilities, maybe double the role, dual the role, and that's where I have heard of moms, and I know even fathers, when they were young, they were in a single parent family. So what happened is that the mom will bring into the child's life father figures. It could be a brother, which is an uncle. It could be a grandfather. And while in school, the mom may put the child in a sports, in a game where there is a sports coach, and involve the sports coach in being a father figure. And I remember speaking to Boys Brigade. I was invited to speak at the retreat, and I asked them one question, asked the leaders a question. In fact, the question came because I was talking to a principal of a school, and the principal said whenever they have a difficult, challenging student, they send the boy to Boys Brigade. So I'm wondering what's the secret of Boys Brigade. So when I had a chance to speak to the Boys Brigade leadership at one of the retreat, I said, why did the principal say this? And I said, what do you do with the boy? And they basically say, we love him. When he come to us, we just love him. And I think that's what every boy will need. A father figure. In fact, every girl will need that. So I would say that this phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, is very real, right? If there's a motherlessness, involve other mother figures. If there's fatherlessness, bring in other father figures for the child.
I think I'll just add on from the community perspective, building on to Jason. It takes a village to raise our children. It takes a whole village to also see families thrive. And there's much that we can do in the community to really do this, to father the fatherless, to mother the motherless. And it's about building that awareness that, every child in Singapore, even in Malaysia, deserves to have a father figure. Access to a father figure and a mother figure if that is lacking. And there's a lot that we can do to come in, to fill that space, to make it conducive as a community, as a society, for such families to continue to thrive without being ostracized, without having any stigma attached. And this is particularly seen in some of the schools in which we run some of our father-child programs, because we realize that sometimes there are kids who can't attend the program because they do not have a father figure in their life. And we often get asked by some of the moms, can the child still attend? And what we would do is to encourage the mom to get another father figure from the family to attend with the child, just to have that bonding. And as a community, as a group of participants in the workshop, we make sure that the child gets accepted, the child is seen, is acknowledged and affirmed in the whole process. And it doesn't just stop there and then, because we try to support the community thereafter to continue to engage the kids, the families, so that they grow up as a cohort. So whether we have Big Brother initiatives, whether we have fathers leaning forward to help foster another child, or to lend themselves as a father figure, I think this is what we could do as a community, as a society, so that no child grows up without a mother and a father figure.
I'm sorry to say that, in fact, I think for the past few decades, we've been seeing a lot of single mothers saying that, telling their children, I'm a mother and a father to you. However, even there are research showing that, roles of fathers are actually irreplaceable, although you are trying so hard. But then I do understand that sometimes it's not really easy to even mend the relationship. However, the father of your children, or even for a child, the identity of the father it cannot be changed. So we really advise or encourage, although there could be some past unpleasant experience, but we do advise that if it is possible, try to let your ex-husband to play their role. And if it is really not possible, I think that, in terms of the family, there should be some father figures. Because I think for my past experience, I heard stories from all these attendees saying that the sense of security, the ability of resilience, even some of this capability, in fact, it's actually impact from the fathers or even father figure. I believe that to every family, there must be a father figure like granddad, uncle, or if and even within your community. Probably if within your church or your community, there should be a youth worker. I think it is really good to have your children spending time with them, or even a school teacher or a coach. In fact, research has been showing that especially the sense of security and also the confidence level, in fact, those are impact from a father figure. So I really hope that, for single parent out there, try to seek help.
Actually, we add the societal and the community lens to this. The village is really where we are placed in, right? We got to bloom where we are placed in. So for those of us who are privileged to lead organizations, we got to bring that heart of the father into the organizations that we lead. We got to father our organizations just like the way we father our own family, because that's the role that we play. Because the father's role transcends generations and even goes beyond just the walls of our own homes. We got to make sure that we care for our people around us. We make sure that boys, young men individuate well into men, young ladies individuate well into women, and they get treated in the right manner, they get honored and respected in the right manner. And there's so much that we can do when we have these opportunities to do so from our positions of authority in every sphere of our community. That's where that greater village has to come in to watch over other families other than ourselves. One of the things I found myself constantly having to unlearn and relearn is my perspectives to how much I need to set my kids up for life. I think all of us as dads, we want the best for our children, and we think that we kind of know what they should be doing, right? But yet at the same time, I find that my kids are my kids. They have their own life, they have their own talents and all, and I find that one of the biggest struggles I have even today is to continually renounce my ambitions for my kids so that they can pursue their dreams and aspirations, and I got to have to remain their coach and their cheerleader in that process. The other thing that I find that I needed to constantly put a check on myself and sometimes to unlearn is my whole perspectives on gender stereotypes. I think a lot of us had grew up with some of these stereotypes of what that should be, to be stoic, to be the protector, the main provider. But as we've come to realize, being the sole provider for the family today is really a luxury in many families. I mean, with the rise of dual income families and all, we find that it's getting harder and harder. We need to prepare. We need to get past those mindsets where men are better suited at work, women are better suited with the kids. I mean, even though research says that women are generally better, but it doesn't mean that we do not do anything. And we have to come in. And it's also true that it's that men can be very nurturing. Dads can be very nurturing even from the onset of the birth of our children. It's just that moms just tend to have a greater influence in our children's life for the first 6 years, and then the dad's role and influence really kicks in the following 6 years, from 6 to 12, from most research. And that's where we play that nice tag team. With equipping of the needs of our children, we know how best to work on the partnership with our spouses to make sure that our kids get the best of our involvement in their lives.
Thanks to our three speakers. Right now we're going to go back to Mentimeter for us to have a chance to think and pen down what is one word that we learned from watching the last 3 videos. Okay, let's take a look at our word cloud. I see the biggest, most common word is intentional. We have many ideas from the first video that we watched just now on how we can be more intentional and more involved dads. And I also see bonding, and I see love and time. So right now, can I get Brian to share his thoughts on some of the words he's seeing in the word cloud just now?
Yes, thanks, Alvin, and thanks everyone for contributing to the Mentimeter. The first thing that came to my mind was also intentionality, and I think in our current times, being intentional is really required for us to really play a more involved role, because you'll find that we all can agree, and I would like to think that we all can agree that fathering is important, being an involved father is important, but yet what stops us from that? So apart from the restrictions that we have the challenges that we face internally, which is unique to every one of us, let's look at society. We find that increasingly society tends to diminish the role of the father. It tends to say that a man can be replaced. We hear many conversations from women who says that they don't need a man in their lives to have a thriving work-life integration, to have a family, and so on. And those are quite scary thoughts, because we know that the role of a dad and the role of a mom is irreplaceable. You can't just replace it and hope that the child grows up holistically. And that is not to say that these things don't happen. I mean, sometimes based on our circumstances, we don't always have it, but we try to find a male or a female authority figure in the lives of our children whenever these are not present biologically. Yes, and back to society, I think what can be done a lot more is to make sure that we emphasize the role of fathers. We also need to affirm the roles and the sacrifices of fathers in every sphere of society, because if society doesn't come in to make the role of the father and the influence of the father apparent, what we stand to lose is the opportunity to strengthen fatherhood, and we will kind of continue to contribute towards fatherlessness in our generation.
Thanks, Brian, for sharing your thoughts. Right now, we're going to go for a short break. But before we go, I would like us to think of the questions and type them in through Mentimeter that we have for our three speakers. We'll be having a time of Q&A after the break. Welcome back to our roundtable on the lost art of fathering, the new normal. I hope we've all enjoyed the session so far, and we found time just now to go to the toilet or just have a stretch break. In our final pre-recorded video segment, we're going to hear what our three panelists have to say about two very tough issues facing fathers: pornography and youth mental health.
I think that is a very good question. In fact, recently, we also have some requests or even reports from our community because of the pandemic. Some of these fathers, they are addicted to pornography. In fact, a lot of all this addiction has to do with rejection. So I really urge, and also I wish to encourage the wives here. I think, as a matter of fact, I think the pandemic actually really affect or hits the man quite hard because of the dignity or even the ego, because of losing job, everything like that. I think to express the acceptance is really very important. However, I still need to encourage the man here. We cannot put the blames all to the pandemic or even your wives. I think we need to be calm and also to understand that, this is not the solution for your problem. If there is a need to express yourself, I think it is good to have a good talk with your spouse. And I think the acceptance for men is really important. However, for young people or children addicted to pornography, in fact, recently we have some workshops. Months ago, we have some workshops with the Hong Kong fathering NGOs. I think they suggest a very good approach. In fact, a lot of Asian countries, we are starting sex education in school. However, please not outsource the job to the schools or teachers. I think, in fact, fathers is the right person. Parents are actually the right persons to start sex education. and be informed that, sex education is not always about, intercourse of stuff like that. But then the identity, the gender identity for your child, it's also part of the sex education. And when kids are having questions on this, don't you think that parents or fathers is the good person to talk to? So in fact, recently we actually advise some fathers, if your child is entering teenage, it's actually one of the conversation. If you are complaining, say, hey, I don't know what to talk to my kids, not only games. Sex education is even a good point to start. Actually, my daughter actually asked me, my youngest daughter, 5 years old, she said, how, she's been watching these movies or videos that they're having babies. Hey, how, where is baby come from? I say it actually takes the partnership of a father, daddy and mommy, to produce a baby, and daddy and mommy has to be in love. Very simple terms. I say it takes the partnership of daddy and mommy, and also, they have to love each other to produce a baby. So, stuff like that, we can actually start as early. So, I think it is good that when they do not take the information from the parents, yes, they will go and search the answer elsewhere. And I think a lot of fathers like myself, we've been through all this and we get all the wrong answers. So I think as a father, we could start that actually to our children or teenage.
I guess I have to say that pornography is something that even for myself, today I struggle with it. I struggle with it because when presented with something pornographic, I can't just look away. I kind of need to turn around and run, literally run, because that's the only way to beat temptation. I say this because I think growing up in my generation, I think many of us were socialized to pornography as a rite of passage during adolescence. Mm-hmm. It also became a proxy for sex education because it just wasn't taught in school to boys at the time. So we gravitate to it because of curiosity. Then along the way, some of us do indulge a little more in it because it kind of fulfilled a certain need at various life cycle stages. And I know it fulfilled a need at the time for curiosity, for exploration into sexuality and all. But at the same time, because it's been so it's become classified as entertainment, that's where the lines start being blurred. Whether is it right, is it wrong? It's hard to put an ethical a thing to it, and that's where I think many of us, myself even in my growing years, I struggled whether it's okay or it's not okay because it seemed to be part of the entertainment industry anyway. And I think I'm just thankful that I didn't allow it to really fulfill a need and thereby allowing it to lead into addiction or even some compulsive disorders. But yet I do know of a lot of close friends who continue to struggle because it has become a replacement for certain needs that were not fulfilled in their lives and in their relationships. But having said that, it's something that I cannot just turn away because I've already opened my eyes to it, and I know that the only way to get around it is to really flee from it when presented with it today.
Actually, there's a saying that porn is the new drug. I used to work with drug addicts, so once it's addicted, it's not easy to get out. So porn is the new drug because of easy access and early exposure since young. Students getting devices free, and I guess that's where, as men, as husbands, fathers, having accountability groups in communities, in small communities, holding each other accountable. How are you doing? What have your eyes been watching? But of course, it has to be very safe, where you don't announce to the whole world, but people you can trust. Recently, I just referred a couple of people for specialized help. Yeah, because it's affecting their marriage, affecting, they're acting it out. It's not just a closed door behind the bedroom, but they're acting it out. They're looking for prostitute, affecting marriage, affecting children. So the whole role model thing just collapsed, as a father. Spending years to build up, but being hooked on one thing and destroying everything. So, but the good news is that I received a report that, this person is responding well. So I guess when we need help, we need to come forward and speak to people that we trust, and then go for the help that we need. With social media, with Facebook, I think all of us are chasing the likes, chasing for people saying nice things to us and getting affirmation. My own experience and journey as a father and journey with other fathers and young people is that if I don't feel love, accepted, affirmed at home, chances are I need to look for it elsewhere. Social media is where I can go to. But the problem is that social media, then you have all the beautiful pictures, photos, and the likes. And after a while, you may not get as many likes as you expect. And then you feel unliked, you feel unloved, you know.
You yourself trolls.
Yeah, the danger is that even though you have 500, but then you start to compare with someone with 1,000 and say, I'm not as liked as the other person. And that's where, if I can't get it at home, I can't get it from friends, I can't get it in school, I can't get it on social media, I feel very unloved, very unaffirmed. And so my advice to fathers, to parents is that make sure the home is where your children feel loved, feel accepted, feel affirmed. And one thing I just want to add is give our children permission to fail. Because failing, performing, and then out of that performance, you get the likes and get the award, the reward. I remember learning this and applying it at home, right? My son, I think he was, 7, 8 years old, going for his swimming test, the first test. And the problem is that it was early in the morning, it was freezing cold in a different pool, whereas all his lessons were usually in a big pool, evening time, hardly anybody, he can take his time to swim. But I was thinking, wow, early in the morning, so cold. And then the tester said, 1, 2, 3, jump, And when they jumped, he was the smallest out of that group. And so he was struggling, and those in front of him were splashing water, and he could hardly breathe. And then along the way, I remember he was just midway in the middle of the pool. He was looking up. All the parents were there, his instructor was there, and he was looking at the instructor and looking at me, looking for daddy, looking for instructor. And I knew what he was looking for. He was looking for permission to fail. Permission to fail, permission to try again. But when he looked at the instructor basically said, come on, you can do it, you can do it. But I could see fear on my son's face. I know my son, right? He grew up in my house, right? And so I look at him knowing that he's basically asking me to say, give up, come to the side, save yourself first, And of course, my son saw me, and then he started swimming to the side. All the parents were looking at me, looking at my son, looking at me, looking at my son. He's like, what sort of father is this? Don't give up so easily. And of course, the instructor looked at me, and knowing that the father has given permission, the instructor didn't say anything. When he came, I pulled him up from the side of the pool. I brought him to a corner, asked him to remove his goggles, and then he broke down and he just cried. And then he said sorry to me. What's my reply to him? I said, it's okay, daddy can't even swim.
Wow.
And maybe that's why I can understand the fear in his face. The other thing I said to him was that it's okay to fail today, you can always try again. And I realized that sometimes our children are just looking for permission to fail.
I was thinking of two things, resilience and risk-taking. Jason shared quite well about the risk-taking part. For my son, for my kids, I try to remind them that it's okay to take the risk because I will take the blame if things go wrong. So, and it didn't come as a revelation. I mean, as wisdom to me. It came out of hindsight because there was a time in school when my eldest child, when he first entered primary school, he used to get into a lot of trouble with the teacher because he just couldn't stop talking, asking questions, and just mingling with his friends. So one day, and I used to be quite an avid volunteer in the school, at least once a week. And there were a few times where the teacher would just stop me in my tracks and just say, hi, I'm just here to tell you about your son, he's misbehaving. And then she'll also add in how is it he's misbehaving when you're working for Dads for Life? You're supposed to be so and so, yeah, but yet your son is like that. How I reacted, the first time I got that, I felt offended. And then there was I can't help but have, shame creep in. But I'm just thankful that somehow at that point in time, I just apologized to the teacher for whatever inconvenience he might have caused the class. I told the teacher that I will take responsibility for that, and I will, by having a talk with him, ensuring that it doesn't happen. Unfortunately, for the rest of the year, it continued to happen. She continued to see me. She continued to use the "that's for life." You're in "that's for life," and your son is still like that. And I continued to apologize. But I tell my son, I mean, that's who you are. Try not to just be mindful that your teacher doesn't like it, and just be mindful of her feelings too, and try not to do this too often. The other thing about resilience is really showing my kids, as part of the whole strengthening of the mind, is to show them that life isn't that all that rosy. We fail, and I shared that during the pandemic I failed so many times in front of them, and I just open up and just let them know how I'm feeling, what I intend to do next, and how I pick myself up, how I pick up the pieces of broken relationships, and how I try to mend them and make an effort to do that in front of them, so they understand not just that things are not perfect, but what reality is. How do we manage conflict? How do we reconcile? How do we restore relationships? And I'm hoping that this will somehow make them a little more resilient when they do face hardships, and when they do fall, or when they do hurt someone else, and when they know how to make it right through the way my wife and I settle our differences at home.
If your children or fathers who have children suffering from mental health, although I'm not an expert to comment on that, but I believe that, by research, why a child should be having mental problem in the first place. I think because by research, in fact, we know that the sense of security and even confidence level has to do with father. I think if your child is already in the stage of mental problem, I think to be there for your child is very important, to accept them, allow them to speak their mind. In fact, a lot of times recently, even we've been having some collaboration with National Mental Health Association in Malaysia as well. In fact, they are some research, because recently in Malaysia we have 440,000 children suffering from depression and mental health issue, which is it's a very alarming figure in Malaysia as well. That's why on behalf of Better Dads Malaysia, we are also looking into this problem, and be there for your child. Listen to them, although probably in your mind you think that this is small matter, like don't ignore them and neglect them. I think that is very important. Please do not be ashamed and do nothing. I believe that if we could be there for them and listen to them, to a child or a young people, this is already very comforting. And I think we need to journey with them to seek help if need be, professional help. But however, I think to be there with them, it's already proven that father presence could actually build confidence, resilient, and even sense of security. I think this is very vital for young people who is suffering on mental health issue.
Well, thank you for submitting all your questions on Mentimeter. We're going to dive
With social media,
right straight into Q&A right now. I'll post the first question to Jason, and that's the most voted question. How would we handle children who have lost their father in early childhood, either through sickness or through abandonment?
Thanks for the question. For 6 years, I had actually been working with children in all the children's homes in Singapore, child abuse cases, abandoned, in foster care. Singapore has 20 over children's homes. So I realized that there will be children in every society, every classroom, where as they are growing up, for whatever reason, the father is gone. It's just not there. So divorce, abandonment, death, sickness, disease, drugs. And what do we do with a child like that? I guess as earlier during the video recorded segment, we did say that every child needs a father and a mother. And so when there's fatherlessness, that's where the father figures need to come in. Maybe a football coach, maybe a youth pastor, maybe a boys brigade officer. My youngest mentee is 15-year-old boy now and the younger brother 13-year-old. So 2 years ago, when the older boy was 13 years old, the younger brother was 11 years old, the mom reached out to me through my Facebook page. Reached out to me, and of course I checked, is there a grandfather in the house? Is there a pastor, if you're part of a church? And the mom told me everyone has tried, and this boy was still suicidal and couldn't bring himself to school, was angry. And so because of some of my work experience, so I reached out, I visited, and I discovered that he grew up in a very violent home. And a few years back, the parents divorced. So I could recognize that he was just acting out, going through puberty, but a lot of pain, a lot of wounds inside. So one day I decided, because he couldn't go to school, in fact the mom called me and said, can you come and talk to him? And so I traveled all the way to the north part of Singapore. He was still lying down on the bed, didn't go to school that day. In fact, he had been skipping school for many weeks already. And I just waited for him to wake up. I just put my hand upon his body and just comfort him, And suddenly I was led to, when I discovered he was awake, I was led to share the evidence, the impact of fathers on children. I just took out my smartphone, went through my slides, and then he was listening. After a while, he turned and looked at me, and then he started looking at my smartphone, and all the evidence, what the research say about the importance of fathers, and harsh fathering is going to create a lot of, rebellion in children. And suddenly, he turned and looked at me, he said, you mean it is not my fault? And I looked at him, I said, it has never been your fault. It's just the things that happen in your life that cause you to have all these wounds and all this pain. And that was when I told him, I said, Uncle Jason will walk with you until your wounds are healed. The inner wounds, the wounds of abandonment, the wounds of being abused. And he looked at me, he said, okay. And I'm happy to say that 2 years later, he's definitely growing much better. Some of his wounds have been healed. He's going back to school. He's doing well in school. Yeah. So for a child like that, I think that's where a father figure needs to come into the life of such a child. Yeah. And be very nurturing, very patient, and just to be very understanding.
Thanks, Jason. Joshua, Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, I thought I would just want to add that I understand that in this panel we're all men, we're all fathers here. I just want to kind of make a pitch that the importance of our role in ensuring that every child in our respective nations grow up with a father figure. I also want to add something encouraging that for my work in the last 5 years, engaging men and kids and all, I find that some of the most exemplary fathers that we have serving with us as Dads for Life and all actually grew up without a father figure, without a physical father. Some lost their fathers at young ages, some had their fathers taken away, incarcerated, but yet they grew up and they turned out to be really good dads today because they understood the importance of, they wanted their children not to take the same routes as them. And one of the things that was that really touched my heart was they are who they are today because along the way they met really good mentors, really good father figures. They were the fortunate ones. I always tell them that they came out of this good and now they're willing to do something. But at the same time, some of the children that I know of who has grown up hurting a lot are children whose fathers are around. They are physically around, but yet they are not emotionally connected to their dads. Yet their dads are not, doesn't have that connection, doesn't affirm them, doesn't accept them unconditionally. Love could be may not have been expressed sufficiently enough in a language that the children understand. And they grew up hurting and they became, and they hurt as men, as husbands, and even as fathers themselves. Some of them, like myself, I shared in my story earlier in some of the pre-recorded segments. Yeah, I struggled with that because I didn't know how to interpret the love language of my dad, even though he was trying to communicate it to me. So that's where I felt that, in our generation, it is so important for us to make time and to have the sufficient tools to be able to communicate not just with our wives but with our children, to make sure that our children are unconditionally accepted, make sure that we are able to relate to them at an emotional level, make sure that we are able to communicate in an effective manner at home. I think these are some of the things that we could do. And once we can do it for our own homes, we might want to lean forward to support another man, another dad, or even another child who may not have that father figure in their lives. Yeah, thanks, Alvin.
Thanks, Brian. Move on to the next question. This is an interesting one. I think a lot of men could relate to having our identity from work. So actually, what happens? This question is: what happens? How can a father cope when there's a reversal of roles with his wife? I.e., he lost his job during the pandemic, and his wife becomes the breadwinner for the family. Joshua, could I get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Alvin. I think a lot of fathers recently might be experiencing something similar. Well, I think first of all we have to have a very honest and sincere conversation and communication with our spouse, and also I think in terms of the reversal of the roles, would it be long term or short term? Yes, indeed, I think the pandemic hit everyone, hit everybody, but then I think we are also coping with the new norm, and yet the new norm has not yet defined. So everybody is coping. So I think perhaps in terms of man, I think the role of being a protector of the family has never changed, although we might not be able to provide for now. But I think it's a good time to unlearn some of these things, like conventionally man has to be the sole breadwinner. Probably we need to unlearn some of these things, and I think it's a good timing to pick up some new skill when we are at this pandemic, at this juncture. So I think since we are coping with the new norm, pick up a new skills, and even I think while we are spending time at home, doing house chores or taking care of children, I think it is a good time for a man or for a dad to start to experience some of these things that our wife is experiencing. Like for instance, for myself, previously, we sometimes we most of the time we eat out. My wife only spend time cooking for dinner. But now perhaps most of you might know that in terms of the pandemic, Malaysia is very serious right now. So I think for the past 10 or 20 days I've not been going out. Basically we can now order everything online and delivered to doorstep. So I kind of like pick up some cooking skill, and I thought to grill, to cook, even to steam is actually very easy, but the time consumed to prepare the dishes are actually a lot. So suddenly I start to realize and appreciate actually how much my wife has done to the family. Their sacrifices and their effort. So I think it's good. But as for house chores and parenting, I think myself, in terms of Better Dads Malaysia or even Dads for Life or Center for Fathering, we always advocate co-parenting. So I think it's good that there is a change of roles, and we need to accommodate. But then I think even previously when the husband is only the sole breadwinner, the wife will also appreciate the help or assistance from the husband. So I think even there is a switch of roles, I think we should always have a conversation to how to deal with this, and I really need to encourage the men or all the dads out there, even at this such a time at this, that we need to humble ourselves, or need to sacrifice for certain new roles. But I think this is not something weak, but it is actually very courageous and brave, for a man to step up, even to pick up house chores or taking care of children, to better protect our family. But then I think this could be short term. I think although we are hit quite badly, but then we should pick up some new skills, or even to accommodate. Perhaps we don't waste this time as the pandemic, but we actually foster better bonding and also conversation, communication with our spouse and also our children. Yeah.
Thanks, Joshua. Brian or Jason, anything to add?
Maybe I just share my own experience. Both my wife and I work, so at one time both of us were working. So, but there were seasons of our life whereby she would take part-time and then she would stop working, because we have 2 children and each of them are very different. And so there was a time where my wife decided to take part-time, stop work so that she can be there for my daughter. And there was also another season where I actually took part-time and also stopped work for a season so that I could be there for my son. And so between the two of us, we realized that, I guess that's where, going back to what Joshua was saying, co-parenting. And I think the other point I also want to say that when we think that men need to work, and the impression is that work is more important, the provider role is more important than the homemaker role, then can you imagine how our wife will feel? It's like, the husband is doing the more important part of the co-parenting, and staying at home is a terrible thing. But I also know that once the dads have to stay at home, and there's a role reversal, we realize that staying at home is not a very easy thing to do, and probably we feel that our wife should be paid more by staying at home and doing the household chores and child rearing, etc. Yeah, that's what I want to share. Thanks. Brian?
Yeah, I guess from my own experience, if I have to really define my household, my wife is the primary breadwinner, because I serve in a non-profit organization. Sometimes a lot of the work that I do with the community, it doesn't come with a very clear remuneration, and I'm only able to do it because my wife takes up that hefty role of ensuring that we have financial stability. And how does that make me feel? I have to confess that when I first took on the role in the non-profit, it really hit me, because I felt like my whole sense of identity just got diminished. I had a good career prior to this, but at the same time, I knew that my career, my identity was tied to my name card. When I moved into the non-profit, the same thing happened. My identity became tied to a name card. I think it took me some time to realize, to de-link that Brian Tan is tied to a name card. And I have to thank my wife for that, because of the many conversations that we had about it, because of the space that she allowed me to experiment and to individuate in new roles. And it boils down to that partnership that we have with our wife, because we knew that as a family, these are some of the things that we need, livelihood issues. We kind of need to confront the tough issues, the tough question of how much is enough. How much is enough? I'm sure many of you knew the answer better than I do, because when I was confronted with that, I had no idea. So I was forced to confront it. We kind of had to have an understanding of, because we are dual income household, we kind of need to make sure that some of these things are addressed. And that's when I realized that there's so much more to my role than just what I bring, what I used to think that I bring home, because I have a partner who's willing to do this. And it's not easy for our wives to take on the role of being the primary breadwinner. I'm sure many of you will acknowledge that, because I acknowledge that my wife has her own aspirations, she has her own dreams. When we got married, when we started having kids, it doesn't mean that her role gets diminished. And I think that goes back to an earlier point I made about role, whether it's the stereotyping of roles, right? I know there was a question earlier asked about what to define stereotyping, whether it's fathering stereotype. What I really meant was gender stereotyping, in terms of whether certain genders are meant to do certain things. For those of you who have daughters, I'm sure you don't want your daughter growing up to know that these are the only roles that you can take on. these are the sacrifices that you have to make. This is a precedence that you have to take in a marriage. We want our daughters to have equal opportunities, equal accessibility to all the things out there, and even an opportunity to achieve their aspirations and their dreams. But of course, in partnership in their own marriage, they need to have their own conversations. So these are the things that I felt would be necessary as a couple, conversations that we need to have at home to be able to address some of these thoughts that might come out, that might surface to make us feel or have that perception that our role might be diminished because of certain gender stereotypes that we might still have, that we will have to confront, not just personally, but as a couple and also as a family. And societal has a big stake in this, because I said that I truly believe that society needs to emphasize the role of fathers in raising children to be good parents, to be good citizens, to partake in society and community subsequently. And how we take on these things, that's where we define our roles in the home and the community. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, gentlemen. We're going to move on into a kind of a tough and somewhat also sometimes tricky topic. We're going to talk about LGBT. This question is there were two separate questions but linked in the Mentimeter. So the first question is, how do I teach my kid about LGBT issues? And the second is, what do I do if I discover that my child is LGBT, a member of the LGBT community?
Yeah. Maybe I could go first on this question. I guess a lot of parents are beginning to ask themselves such questions, because even if they don't, their children will come back and have conversations with them, and they'll be quite stuck. In my own journey, knowing that the trends are in a certain direction, earlier I talked about economic trends, social trends, moral trends, so I think this comes under the latter. I think first, as parents, we need to educate ourselves before we can educate our children. We need to understand what is happening. We need to be equipped. We need to read up before we can even have conversations and educate. So I would say that's the first point. The second point would be, if we talk about sex, sexuality, gender, LGBTQ, it gets more and more complex. It gets more and more controversial. But I would say start with the basic. So if our children are young, don't even go there first, because if we don't even understand, we straight away we talk about university level, postgraduate level topics, it will confuse the children. I would say always start with sex education. In fact, sex education is the basic foundation. Talk about sex. Of course, for young children would be, you're a boy, you have boy parts. You're a girl, you have girl parts, And then start very basic, and then age appropriate. And along the way, then talk about sex. And of course, if you are religious, you have a religion, then sex is a gift from God. As parents, sometimes from the traditional families, we avoid, sex is a dirty word, as then after a while, our children grow up, it's like, well, all the friends are talking about it, Netflix, YouTube are all talking about it, and then they couldn't have conversation with their own parents. And as fathers, as moms, we do want to be the one teaching such important topics. And of course, when you go into the higher level, more complex, more controversial topics like LGBTQ, now I would want to just mention this, because there are a lot of resources that you can go to. Do separate the person from the practices, separate the individual from the ideology, right? Separate so when we look at a person, we need to love the person, we need to accept the person, we need to empathize with the person. But if you look at the whole ideology, the propaganda, the practices, some may not be helpful, right? We do not support everything, we may not agree with everything, especially when we have certain set of values, and some of these could be religious values. We may not be able to align to some of these practices or propaganda ideology, but every person is precious. Everyone is, well, as a Christian, I believe everyone is created in God's image. So related the second question. Then what if one of my children come to me and say, Dad, I think I'm gay. Now, if I separate the two, then I can look at my son and say, you are still a child of God, you are still a human being, you are a person that I should love, I should come alongside. And in fact, I will start with saying, it must have been a difficult time, you must have been thinking about this for a long time. Thanks for sharing this with me. I don't know everything, but let's find out the answers together. I will be here, I will always be here for you. Let's journey together. I will journey with you. I think that will be the first thing I would say if my child were to come out to me and say that this is something that he's struggling with, or this is something that he thinks he is a gay or belonging to the LGBT community.
Thanks, Jason. Joshua, and Brian, anything to add to this? If not, then we'll move on to the next question. The next question is actually on another very, very popular topic, social media. And the question is about how social media has become a major influence, especially among young children, and how can we manage this if you have kids that are under 11? Brian, you want to have a go?
I'm reflecting on this question because this is something that I'm currently facing in my own home. Like I say, my eldest is 11, and he's also confronted with with the digital world today. You heard Joshua share a lot about the screen time. How do we manage screen time? And we also acknowledge that today social media is starting to become a community, that our children turn to social media, not just for the content, but also for that sense of belonging, for the sense of affirmation that they get. So that kind of got me thinking about what is it that they derive out of social media that feeds the particular needs that they have, a sense of belonging for community with peers, a sense of affirmation. And those are the things that I started reflecting upon myself as a dad. Am I giving my children sufficient of this? Am I filling their love tank enough? Am I giving them enough affirmation? Am I providing or intentionally building a community for them, a physical community in this sense for them, so that as they move into the social media, into the virtual realm, into social media, where they're presented with the same things, would this then just complement what they're already receiving, or is it going to substitute it for them to want to spend more time in that realm? So these are the things that I currently contend with. I mean, I'm no expert at managing this, but these are just some of my initial thoughts about how I'm going to manage it, because I know that I cannot deny them access to it. I can do for the younger kids at the moment, but increasingly as they go to school, I mean, most of you with primary school going kids, you know that our kids are exposed to so much more. They have so much access. Their friends are talking about games and sometimes movies and stuff, even in the upper primary range, and there's nothing that we can do to stop that from happening. But what we can do is to see their world, is to get into their world, to see their world from their perspectives, to understand their needs, and to make sure that we fulfill as much of the needs as we can, and they take on the additional inputs from their peers, from their world, and hopefully, like I say, it doesn't substitute what we are giving them, making sure that they never have a lack from home, so they are better bolstered to take on what the world is giving to them. If I outsource all these things to the world, then yes, it is my fault that my kids at some point will view social media and digitization as the main thing that fulfills their needs. So those are just my quick thoughts about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Joshua, any thoughts on social media?
The question was about social media for kids below 11, right? I think the number one question we really need to ask that it's our child or is my child ready for a social media account, okay? But I think as a matter of fact that we need to admit that because now everybody, I mean every children is actually having a class online, okay? And I really resonate together with Brian, whereby like my eldest is 13, and even though if we do not allow our kids to have an account, they might felt that they are actually socially not acceptable because all of their friends have a social media account. But then I think as a parents, we also need to be concerned about some issues like cyberbullying. And in fact, a lot of nowadays, in fact, a lot of social media platform has take cyberbullying a very serious issue, and they have concerns. You can actually find a lot of all these parental guide on different social media platforms. I think the other question we need to for parents or even for fathers, I think, do we know the popular apps? And how does it function? I think we need to equip ourselves. In fact, there are a lot of parental control and parameters that we could have nowadays, like for Instagram and TikTok, you can actually link it as a family account. I think we also need to communicate with our children is that, daddy or mommy is not spying on you, but tell them about the reality of cyberbullying, and also there are evil person out there, looking out for young children like you, and probably you could actually easily find a lot of news regarding all this cyberbullying, and also people abuse and take advantages on children. So we shall tell them about this. I like one of these idea actually initiated by my wife. There are a lot of documentary done by all this cyberbullying and even culprit for child pornography. So there are some documentary done regarding this. So in fact, my wife the other day actually found one, and we watched it together with my eldest son, and let them know the reality and how, and tell them this is what happening elsewhere, and so daddy mommy will try our very best to protect you. That's why we need to know certain things. So when they know that the motive and intention is actually come out of love, I think our child will understand. So I think that's some advice for parents. We really need to get ourselves equipped, and for our child's sake, I think if your child have one of these social media, we might need to sign up one of these account as well, not to spy on them, but then to have better communication. I think it will be actually very interesting, to create some short videos together, and also to equip our child, not only to consume all the media, but let's do something fun together, and we can actually take this as a bonding time as well. Yeah, this is some of my thoughts. Yeah.
Thanks, Joshua. Anything else to add, the panel? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next question. Switching gears a little bit to a more kind of a bit more light-hearted question, but also pertinent to dads. What advice can we give to dads who are naturally unexpressive? Don't worry, we won't ask the person to raise their hand on Zoom to say who asked this, but we want to hear the thoughts of the panel on this. Ryan? You're laughing.
Yes, I'm laughing because I thought this could be my wife writing in to get me to talk about to explain my unexpressiveness. I have this issue. I mean, most people know that I have a poker face, so and I struggle with expressing myself, even emotionally. So, I mean, even as a young husband, becoming a young father. Even sometimes today, I find it hard to express my true feelings to my kids, right? Because I grew up with this I used to grow up with this mindset that being a man. I mean, I have a perspective of masculinity where men have to be stoic, men have to be expressionless. I mean, we do what needs to be done. We don't burden somebody else. Those things may seem manly to me at that time, but I realized that it's hurting my marriage. It's hurting my family, my kids, because when it comes to my wife expects me to be able to share with her everything about me. But I do not know how to articulate those things. And I don't share because I didn't want to burden her with my problems, right? I want to take it on and all. So my so-called act of being nice and being the man for her is actually hurting her, because from what I've come to realize later in our marriage, or quite recently, it's because I'm not able to share these things with her. She finds that that there wasn't that level of intimacy. We couldn't be intimate enough, or she views it as me not being able to trust her enough with some of these things. That she thinks that I confide in all other men except her. Because I think women tend to confide in one another a lot more. Men, I don't think many of us really confide with buddies about our issues. But that's her perspective. And I cannot trivialize the hurt and the pain that she's carried with her for a really long time. She's hurt, she's disappointed, she's frustrated because I couldn't share with her. And I didn't know how to do that. And when it comes to the kids, I think we've talked about effects of fatherlessness, where when children don't hear enough of "I love you," "I accept you for who you are," "You're wonderful," your act of disobedience may not be acceptable, but I still love you nonetheless because you are my son, you are my daughter. So when they don't get enough of this, when they don't get their love tanks filled out, that affects them too, and it has psychological impact on them subsequently. They will adjust badly in school, they will adjust badly in life, they will be underdeveloped socially. So those are things that I realized are because I couldn't communicate my emotions, I couldn't communicate love, I couldn't express my feelings. I am hurting my wife, I am hurting my kids. So what do I do about it? As Jason say, go back to school, whether it's father school or an organization, a center like Center for Fathering, to learn how to address some of these things, to learn how to better communicate, to learn words, to start building up my own vocabulary for feelings and all. But I think more importantly is to change that mindset that I have an influence on the people around me. I have an impact, and if I don't, if I'm not cognizant of what everybody feels or expects of me, it's going to hurt them, and I cannot trivialize that. So that has convicted me to want to make a change for myself. Thanks.
Joshua, Jason, anything to add?
Maybe I can just add something. I've been working with a lot of fathers now, part of father communities, and sometimes I even mentor fathers who never really have a father figure themselves, or they have a very distant father, and then they will tell me, Jason, my father is come home from work, he work long hours, very responsible, a provider, he come home, he sit down, he read newspapers. I don't even know whether he loves us. But I'm sure if I have a chance to talk to his father, the father will say, love? Of course I love my children. I work very hard, no? But you see, to the father providing, working hard, that is love. But to a young child, hearing the father say, I love you, or receiving a hug, and that is love. Earlier I mentioned about these two young boys. I started bringing them out, just being a father figure, out to playground, up to the beach, just spending the time that their own father's supposed to spend with them. And each time I drop them off, what I will always do is give them a hug. Make sure they receive the hug they never had from their own father. And I remember the first couple of times when I reach out to them, wanting to hug them, while they will be sideways, the older boy turned around and I had to hug the back. But I must say that after 1.5 years or so, when I came out from my car from one side, they will be waiting for me from the other side, waiting not just for me to hug them, but they will hug me back. And I know that together with some of the other fathers, whenever we come together for community, for sharing, for fathers group, what we will do at the end, we will always say, I think Brian will know, father's hug. We will always say father's hug. What happens is that every father will hug almost every other father in the group. Usually, some of the fathers who have been hugged for the first time, they'll be very stiff, but along the way, they get used to it. The whole idea is that we get used to hugging each other, men's hug, so that when the fathers go home, they will be able to hug their wife and hug their children. So if you don't know how to be expressive, join the fathers community and learn how to hug.
We're going to just move to the final question. We're coming to the end of our Q&A. And that's about discipline. We want to ask, what can fathers do when discipline no longer works and the child keeps on, doing wrong in spite of discipline? Joshua, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is a tough question. I think in terms of discipline, I think a lot of fathers might use the what they have experienced, the disciplinary methods by their own father. But I mean, we are entering into the 21st century when we talk about more communications, expressive, like we just talk about the expressions of love. I think, and I think a lot of Asian fathers usually, we start off with the disciplinary question, like, saying no, we shouldn't do this, no to that. I think one of the tips I could advise, maybe we should stop saying no and stop asking why, but then talk about how. How can like if your kids' room is very messy, how can we get this cleaned up in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, make them think together with you, or even, with your assistance. I think that could actually turn the discipline into a rather positive actions that, can foster bonding as well. I mean, just a simple thought. I leave it to the other two panels.
Thanks, Joshua. Jason O'Brien, anyone?
Well, I'm going to highlight what Jason said earlier in the LGBT segment about seeing the person as a person. So there's really two perspectives that I take when it comes to disciplining my child. The first perspective is my child is naughty and therefore he does wrong. The other perspective that is available to me is my child is good, is a good person, but he happened to do something that is wrong. So I realize that when I make that distinction, or when I reframe my mind to make that distinction that my child is good, but he did something wrong, in the way I mete out punishment, or the way I try to rectify the behavior, I'll work with him to address that. I will affirm him that he's a good person and try to address the wrong that he did. And and I find that helped him to understand. I mean, first of all, be reassured that he is unconditionally accepted in the house, that despite his wrongdoing, he is still accepted by us. He doesn't have to do anything right or anything good to deserve our love and our affirmation and our acceptance of him as part of the family. But what we highlight is we don't condone the act of disobedience or the act of willfulness that he has committed, and we address the act. Having said that, it is not always easy to do that, because I personally have always gone down the first rabbit hole of you're naughty and therefore you do that, and I often have to find time to pull myself back and to try to reaffirm him along the way, but deal with that thing. And I think most psychologists will tell you that it's easier for a child to understand that who they are is separate from what they do. So if you need to address the part that they have done wrong, it's a lot easier, because they have control over the part that they choose to do wrong for whatever reasons. But if we start off on the point that they are bad, it's very hard for them to change who they are, because that is who they are. I think I shared in my earlier video about my son being who he is in school and being penalized for it, being punished for it again and again. There are many things I could do as a dad, and I have to confess that initially I tried to use threat to control his behavior, and then I realized that I was stifling him as a person, because that is just who he is. He likes speaking up, he likes talking to his friends. It's just unfortunate that his teacher likes a lot of control in the classroom. So that didn't work out for the teacher. But do I stifle my child because of what the school, I acknowledge that I am responsible for him causing, disrupting the classes, but at the same time, I kind of need to manage that. So I chose instead to take full responsibility, try to change him over the years, manage him, but at the same time, not stifling his character, who he is, but to address the teacher's concern and to apologize to the teacher and try to get him to understand from the teacher's perspective of disrupting the class, and hopefully he tries to minimize disrupting the class without compromising who he is as a person, because that is to be cherished, and in the family, at home, we have to do that. So if the disciplining doesn't work, if despite how much we do and the wrongdoing continue to persist, I think it's a long journey that we're going to have to take as parents to continue to affirm the identity, but yet continue to address that act of wrongdoing as best as we can moving forward. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Well, we've heard a lot today, and even as we, just before we finish this session, I want to give us a couple of minutes to pen down a call to action. One thing that we will do differently from today. You know, even as I was listening to the speakers, one thing that I know I'll do differently from today is to be more intentional about sharing my, expressing my thoughts and my emotions to my wife and my children. So, what about yours? Okay, just getting a couple of responses now. Spend more quality time with children. Spending time with their own father. Be more patient and kind with their kids. I know that was one of the Q&A questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. Be more intentional in being a father. Be more patient and understanding. And hug and verbally express love more. Managing the child, not controlling them. Learning to listen and be more understanding to make time with their wife and son. Spending time with my son. Building a healthy physical community for my child. Be present. Okay, we've come to the end of our roundtable, The Lost Art of Fathering in the New Normal. I hope all of us are less lost after this session. Please join me in thanking Jason Wong,
Thank you.
Brian Tan, and Joshua Hong for their time and insightful and honest sharing.
Eagles to me is a voice of reason in ministry as well as in the marketplace. A voice of sanity to a certain extent in a world where there's a lot of information.
The Eagles are thought leaders in many of these areas that integrates very real, pertinent issues in not only Christian life but in the larger community and society. Mobilize Christians who have been placed in very key positions or strategic positions to address some of the social issues.
The passion, the stickability, the gung-ho-ness never change. Our hair will get whiter, but the spirit never change.
Eagles has meant food, fun, and fellowship, but also learn how to serve God and people with professionalism, integrity, and excellence.
What really impacted me is that 25 years ago when I knew all of you, and now 25 years later, all of you have gone stronger and even more committed with no signs of letting up in your mission.
I look at Eagles Ministry and I see the work that they have been doing all these years over the decades. That tenacity to go on and build solid substance for people has been one to be admired, and I've been admiring from afar for a long, long time.
The power of just a few individuals who are passionate, and really are just sold out in wanting to do something for God and to make the impact in the marketplace, not just staying within your usual comfortable confines, but really going out into areas that sometimes are unfamiliar and even maybe taking a big risk doing it.
When something sticks together for a long time, you know there's some glue behind it, right? And that's the credibility. These folks here at Eagles is really about that camaraderie and the availability of their time, of their resources, and of their heart and passion. I've known these men and women for a long time, and they've impacted thousands of people, all over the world. And where Eagles is, that's where amazing things can happen.